Welcome to Public Affairs Roundtable, a discussion of current events in the nation and around the world and how they affect the people of Indiana. Here's your moderator, Larry Lough.
Political loyalty should not be a requirement for government employment, so says the United States Supreme Court. In a 5-4 decision last week, the court said that government should not hire, promote, or transfer employees based on their political affiliation. Today on Public Affairs Roundtable, we will continue the debate, good politics versus good government, or are they compatible? Our panelists are Bill Schreiber, Executive Assistant to the Democratic Speaker of the Indiana House of Representatives, John Sweezy, for 18 years, Marion County Republican Chairman, also Chairman of the National Association of Urban Republican County Chairmen, David Larson, who is President of the Indiana State Employees Association, and Ray Sheely, Chairman of the Political Science Department of Ball State University. Ray, we had to see this coming, given a recent decision a few years ago that firing could not be done based on partisan politics, that this seems to be a natural progression. No surprise or any surprise at all?
Actually, what the Supreme Court was doing here from a public law standpoint was reconciling a couple of decisions down in the lower appellate courts. For example, the Circuit Court out of Illinois had previously ruled that whereas you could not discharge employees because of partisanship, because they're a Republican or a Democrat, you could take partisanship into account in hiring people. So that if you came into an office previously the other party or opposite party held that office, you could, as the other people retired or quit, you could hire your own. Well, what the Supreme Court did was extend this same principle that partisanship has no role in discharging employees. They've also now closed the door to using partisanship as a criteria in hiring employees in the public sector. So in that sense, it's a reconciliation of two different points of view coming out of the lower courts. And the Supreme Court has settled it, although narrowly, in the 5-4 decision, as you mentioned. So right now, the only time you can take partisanship into account is at policy level positions.
Is this going to have a big effect on government, state level, county level, Bill?
I think it's going to have a bigger effect on politics, the nature of politics. There are a number of reasons I think people become active in politics. For some, it's ideology. For others, it's more tangible benefits like patronage. And the parties, it seems to me, are ill-equipped to handle a strong ideological orientation. They need a counterpoise, and I'm afraid we may have lost it here in this decision.
We're going to see an effect in Marion County, John?
Long range, there'll be an effect on the party. It's one more blow against a strong party structure, and if strong party structures have a value to society, which I'm sure Bill and I both think they do, it will have an effect. Immediately, it won't have the ostensible signs of partisanship, the patronage, clearance cards, and that sort of thing. We haven't done for 15 years. The Republican Party basically has found there's many areas that we couldn't fill from a patronage viewpoint anyway. As government becomes more and more technical, you're hiring computer programmers instead of file clerks and this type of thing. So there's been a decided drift that way. But from a number of different viewpoints, such as the chief executive, whether it's a county clerk or a mayor or a governor, it would seem to me that any chief executive should have the right to hire those people that basically reflect his viewpoint. People elect him to achieve things. Why shouldn't he have people who want him to succeed? Whether it's working on a front counter or cleaning ditches.
David Larson, that's a good point. You need people who are loyal to you if you're going to be good employees. But the ISEA sees this decision as something really good.
Oh, yes, there's no question about that. The ISEA has been working on it for years through both the Democrat and Republican regimes. I think that probably it's true that we agree with both these gentlemen that strong party structure is the way, because that's what this country is built on, is politics and the debates that go with it. However, when it comes to the taxpayers' money, we believe it ought to be on the person that's best qualified and not necessarily the party they belong to. I have some very good friends in both parties, and they certainly are qualified to do certain jobs, and then I know some that in neither party they're probably qualified for either. So to the taxpayer's standpoint, the best person should do the job. And I think it goes clear back in 1976. We had a lady that was refused to be hired because she was the opposite party that was in control and refused to pay into the 2% club. And we had to take that to court and won about a $50,000 settlement at that time on it. And the courts then agreed that you cannot hold out people from their jobs because of their political affiliation. And we went right down through the line. We fought year after year. We went with worked with Governor Orr to, in his latter days in the office, come up with the executive order saying that there be no more 2% club, no more political hiring. And of course, when Governor Bai run for office, until he very definitely made that one of the planks of his platform, that political hiring would not be anymore, we wouldn't endorse him. Once that come about, we endorsed him wholeheartedly. So we fought that time and time again. 1988, there was a case in Jasper with the Department of Natural Resources where a lady was not hired for, I believe it was Pulaski fish hatchery because of that. We took that, really didn't have to go to court. We threatened the court, wrote some letters, got some media publicity, and the lady was hired and she's doing a fine job. In fact, she's had, looking at her evaluations, they've been above average all the way through. So I don't believe that all Democrats are bad and all Republicans are bad, only when they're in party, you know, so it still goes to the people that have the ability and are the ones that should do it and give the taxpayer the best for the dollar.
I can't believe even a Supreme Court decision, though, is going to keep winners in situations from finding rewards for their friends in government. I mean, this is not going to abolish political hiring altogether, is it?
No, especially not at the policy-making level. I think the courts have continued to protect policy makers who are appointed. I think it's important to note that this was a 5-4 decision, that among the 4 in the minority are the 3 newest members of the court, along with the Chief Justice. So this is a decision that could be a bit precarious as we look out over the years, allow George Bush one near-term appointment, and we may have a very close question coming back to the court. I think that it's important also to note that the 2 values that are sort of at odds here are responsiveness, which is the justification, or as you like it, rationalization for patronage, and expertise, efficiency, which is the rationalization or justification for the merit system. And what would be best, of course, the best of all worlds would be to have a combination of efficiency and responsiveness. I'm afraid that this decision may mitigate against responsive government in favor of efficiency only.
Of course, efficiency, another term for that is bureaucracy.
I appreciate.
Or the flip side of that. And that's what we're tending toward in government, an unresponsive bureaucracy. And if a chief executive is elected, again, whether it's a governor or a mayor or whoever it happens to be, if they cannot implement their policies because of resistance down through the ranks, which happens. In fact, years ago, I heard an excellent speech by Edward R. Murrow about the Eisenhower years when he came in after the place was full of FDR Democrats. And basically, he put out something like 100 presidential orders. We got out of office 8 years later, 95 of them were not implemented because the president no longer manages federal government by no stretch of the imagination. And that's where we're going toward with state government.
I must interject here, gentlemen. There's been just let's look at the Midwest states for a moment. Now, sure, we can always bash the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. for being unresponsive to people in central Indiana. But if you go to Wisconsin, that has had a long and proud tradition of a merit system in employment, going back to Bob LaFollette's governorship in Wisconsin. If you go next door to Minnesota, states that are, Wisconsin, roughly comparable to Indiana, are you going to contend that Indiana's government, because it's patronage-based, is more responsive to the people than Wisconsin's? Where Wisconsin's entire state heritage has been progressive, has been, it seems to me, just every bit as responsive as Indiana's state government has been.
course, in Indiana, there's something like 36,000 employees in state government, of which 25,000 were already and have been for years merit system. It's a question of proportion, and well, vast areas of the
Let me put another point on this. As an educator, our very brightest students that study for the public service, that attempt to get their Masters of Public Administration degrees, for example, end up leaving this state because of the patronage system. They can go to a Wisconsin or a Minnesota or a California or a Colorado, and they can get a job where it is, in effect, tenured, if you will, in a merit system. Whereas if they go to work in the city of Muncie or Anderson or Richmond or Indianapolis, their job is tied to the coattails of the mayor or the chief executive. If the mayor loses, they're out of a job, and they've spent 5, 6, 7 years in some cases going to school to get the skills, the technical skills, to serve the public. And yet their man loses or their woman loses and they're out. Now, I don't think that's particularly healthy for Indiana's economy.
No, but neither is it healthy to drive political considerations underground, which I think may at least implicitly be part of your question. There was a song a couple of years ago by a group called the Eagles, and one of the lyrics was, "Someone tell me how to know the dancer from the dance." And the question here is, can you separate politics from government? And even if you can, should you attempt to separate politics from government? Because when you do you lose part of the dynamic that makes government work? Minnesota and Wisconsin may very well reflect their people and their heritages pretty accurately, and it may be that Illinois and Indiana do as well, but in different ways.
Well, I think that everybody's agreement, including the Supreme Court, on the policy-making people. But in going along with the fact that when you change everyone, I think it's been even evident in the last couple of years, changing from the Republicans to the Democrats. When you change that many people, it's very difficult to come out and find good qualified people to even carry out the policies, as some of the recent events have proven. So if you take the policy-making people and take the time to really search that out, carry out your policies, and you'll still allow the people that are in the jobs that have not necessarily policy, but expertise in skills and things of that nature, really don't have anything to do with politics. In fact, it's a shame that more of them don't just get out and vote. But I think we need to do more along that line in working in the between the two parties to see to it that people don't have so much apathy to the system than to worry about whether each person with a shovel in their hand is one of the party that was elected or not.
Except that I'm afraid that this decision has done just the opposite of what you might wish. I think it's discouraged people. We may all have a philosophical orientation to politics ourselves, but there are others who have other sort of value orientations, and for those of us in the middle class to constantly impose our values on others, it seems to me is really unfair, and in the end it saps the political system of an important component that's made it so dynamic over the years.
There's a certain skepticism of people about government who refer to things, oh, well, that's just politics. Does the merit system not add some credibility to government with the population?
I don't see that it does. In the first place, most of the highly technical positions, it is difficult to fill them. You don't have a great number of good sanitary engineers. You don't have a great number of good mental health technicians and such. You know, these are not people that we have clamoring at our gates to fill anyway. It's a sad fact, and I'm sure the Democrats at state level, as they've been able to hire Democrats, and they should have. Evan Bayh should and has hired Democrats. That's what he was elected to do, was to implement his policies. And I applaud the fact that he's made the changes he has and has hired Democrats to do it. Our people are not necessarily wishing him well. Why should they be on his payroll, confronting the public, talking with them, possibly sabotaging him and such? That's not the right approach.
And what about the presumption that if you are politically active, you've necessarily had a lobotomy that makes you ineffective and totally lacking in expertise? I think it's possible to bring a high level of professionalism and expertise to a job and a strong political orientation. And I think that's been the history of Indiana government, just as Ray Shealy described the Minnesota and Wisconsin experiences that are different. That doesn't make them worse. That doesn't make them better. Just means that they're different.
Well, we certainly don't take the standpoint that because you're politically active that it makes you some kind of an imbecile otherwise. The fact of the matter is we've got a lot of people who are very politically active, and I don't think that it's appropriate to make that kind of a statement. And also you give the insinuation that that the only reason people vote may be because they want to get involved in the spoils, and I think that would be a poor way to look at politics also, because I certainly don't want to be involved in the spoils, but I'll guarantee you I vote every time. And we certainly encourage our people to vote. In fact, we have one of the largest numbers, percentage-wise, of members that are registered to vote of probably any organization around. And it's not because we expect them to go out and get a job after the fact, but to be able to keep their job no matter which party. And we are about split down the middle as far as membership is concerned in the parties also.
Let me follow up on one of your points there, John. It seems to me that the parties now are really under the gun to come up with other ways of appealing to people for political activism. I mean, I don't think it's proper for any party official to stand up and say, oh, well, the war's over now and we lost. I mean, it seems to me that if the court has said, hey, there's a conflict between patronage and your First Amendment rights, and the First Amendment won, and it should have, in the opinion of the court. So consequently, it's up to party officials, if you want to keep a vibrant party system going and you want to continue to attract people into campaigns and into government, you better find other ways of appealing other than a $12,000 a year paycheck.
But let me interject there, because across this country, and because of my position on a national basis, most of the political parties across this country are dead. Both parties, especially in the major cities. The only viable political force in most major cities is the AFL-CIO, some cases the teachers and such. But because of the wastage away of patronage system, plus a lot of other things, the parties are just shells. They don't exist. I know of one massive county, Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. At one point in time, when I was talking to the chairman there, there are 1,600 precincts, of which there were 600 manned. If you have less than half the precincts manned, you don't exist as a party. You really don't. And of course, if you talk to the other people who are in the volunteer business, whether it's Boy Scouts or Cancer Society or whatever, volunteerism is dying. It is a terrible, tough job today to recruit and find volunteers. When Bill was my opposition county chairman of Marion County, we appeared many times together in front of civic groups and such, appealing to them to become active in the political parties. The fact is that most people are not active in anything. They aren't active in their church, they're not active in their social club, they're not active in the political party.
I don't know what people you run up against, John, but all of our survey evidence shows the average adult American belongs to 6 different groups.
They belong, but they don't participate.
Well, maybe one of those is not the local precinct organization, okay? But they belong perhaps to their church club and their bowling club. Americans are very active. As a matter of fact, they're larger joiners than survey data show from any other industrialized country in the world. Now, what I'm saying is that the political parties better get on the bandwagon.
That's not the real world. That is not the real world. I don't care what your survey data tells you, because I'm out there fighting it every day. Bill's out there fighting it every day, trying to recruit people. And the fact is that people might say they belong to the Masons, or may say they belong to the Cancer Society, etc. Most of them may be members, and they may pay their dues. They do not participate. They do not volunteer their time.
But it's like political parties. Doesn't that have a lot to do with the organization itself? Isn't the reason Democratic Party and Republican Party are having trouble is they're really not relevant or responsive to people they asked to join? That, in fact, it has really little to do with Supreme Court decisions. That, in fact, there is a general disenchantment of people with politics, per se, and the parties specifically, and they don't join because they're not relevant.
Well, they don't join for a lot of reasons. The Supreme Court has just added one more reason not to be active in politics by eliminating this patronage vehicle. I think it ought not be lost on any of us the irony that 9 lifetime appointees, patronage appointees, comprise the Supreme Court of the United States, and 5 of them found it within themselves to outlaw the very sort of patronage appointment that brought them to their high offices. I love the First Amendment. I support the First Amendment. I support this ruling of the court because it is now the law of the land. But I can still disagree with it even as I support it.
But I'm sure, Bill,
the
it's not
next appointment changes it.
I'm sure, Bill, it's not the first time in your life that a lawyer or a politician has turned on you.
Oh, no.
That may be the case with the court.
We have discussed many times, one of the banes of political activity is when you elect them. That does happen. One of the things that I would say in addition, I think probably the real beneficiary will not be the union. It will be the lawyers. Because there's going to be everyone who doesn't get a promotion, everyone who doesn't get hired now will be looking for a cause of action because it can't be them at fault, obviously. It'll be the system.
We've seen a lot of that in Delaware County of people who've been demoted or fired who scream politics. And locally, government has spent a lot of money in court on this very thing.
Sure.
Have you experienced that? But what you're saying is we're going to see a lot more of it.
Sure, now you've opened a new area. Someone who wants a job. Now, someone who's on a job who was hired and is performing and such, there is some argument, probably can go to court and prove some abilities and such. If you're looking at 6 people to hire as a secretary in some office, how are you going to prove what your motives were for hiring? Are you going to have to do all the testing of typing speeds and all the rest of it? I don't know.
It may be now that political activity becomes a disadvantage. That if the 5 of us apply for a job and I am the best qualified, but I also have the highest political profile, it may be that the employer will say, I don't want to take a chance on Schreiber.
Oh, yeah.
He's got too high a profile. I risk a lawsuit. Let's take one of the other 4.
Now, I've heard you read the minds of the American public in terms of why they participate in politics. Now you're trying to read the minds of employers. I'll tell you, all government has to do to comply with this is invest a little bit in a modern personnel system. Private employers know how to do this. They do it all the time. Indeed, private employers give typing tests. I think typing tests ought to be given, even whether it's a government job or a private sector job.
I certainly concur with that.
But in the private industry, they can do it.
Substitute for a modern personnel system, I think government better wake up and invest in personnel.
Why can't government do that, John?
Oh, government can do it. I'm saying
it does do it.
Private industry can do it, but they do it on their own volition because of whatever they want to test for. Since politics is not a part of the decision-making in private industry, good or bad.
But being it's one of the largest businesses in the United States specifically, then I think some good business ethics can't hurt it at all. And I think what you're talking about here is good ethics, when you test the person for what they're qualified to do. And that's all that we've ever asked. And you'd say it's a new area. It's not a new area because in 1984, we filed suit in behalf of state employees to allow them to be not be shunned away from because of their political affiliations, and we won it. It was a district judge, I'm trying to think of his name right now, I think it was Stuckler, William Stuckler, I believe it was, that said definitely we have a law that says you can't fire for that reason. By the same token, there's no reason to say you can't hire, and that's narrowing it down, and we won that case. And that's the same, using that case is the reason we were able to come back with just some letters and get the lady from Jasper her job when she was held out. She was without doubt the highest qualified person on the job, and the DNR just simply said, no, because you refuse the 2% and so forth, you're not going to do it. And this is certainly not beneficial, I don't think, to the system as a business. It's certainly not beneficial to the person paying the bill, and that's the taxpayer, and that's you and me.
Let me
leave the policy part out.
Larry, if I could bring up one other point here, shifting away from business and tests for in-hiring, let's talk about the strength of the party organizations again for a moment. Indiana is reputed to be a very strong patronage state, a very strong party organization state, and a very highly corrupt state. Okay? We rank right up there, as Teddy White used to say, as one of the Jukes family of American politics. Now, is there any correlation between patronage and corruption and strong party organizations? On the other hand, you'll look at Wisconsin and Minnesota and Colorado, the others, they are not noted. There is a correlation in all of our studies between patronage-based systems and corruption.
Does politics breed corruption?
Obviously not, in my opinion. What is your statistics for corruption? I resent that. Whether you're talking about city level or state level.
Indictments of public officials.
All right, I'm trying to think.
Indictments or convictions?
You want to look at the state level in Indiana, Department of Correction, Department of Education?
We've had at the local level as well.
20 years.
At the local level as well. We've had the two previous Senate President Pro Tems in this state went to federal pen for corruption. Okay? We've had...
now, wait a minute. You're talking about legislative side. That has nothing to do with patronage. Nothing whatsoever to do with patronage.
Oh, they were elected officials. We're not talking about elected officials. I think we're talking about people who are hired by elected officials. I never thought that you'd get me to defend those two Senate Presidents Pro Tem, but you've done the impossible, Ray.
Boy, that's the truth.
Surprising what happens sometimes.
Yeah, really.
So there is no correlation between the patronage system as you see it and Indiana's reputation for corruption.
I think that the causal relationship may be between strong partisanship and rather than patronage itself, where a prosecutor in Indiana does tend to be very political and to occupy a position where he can embarrass with an indictment, whether or not there's ever a conviction, where he can embarrass somebody in the opposing party.
Any chance, really, Ray, that a 5-4 decision, a decision of this magnitude would be reversed?
I think it's very unlikely. Very unlikely. Because there's a whole body of case law that has been moving in this direction for some time.
And we're moving out of here.
Right.
We're out of time. Thanks, Bill Schreiber, John Sweezy, David Larson, Ray Sheely for being with us today. I'm Larry Lough. See you next week on Public Affairs Roundtable.
Public Affairs Roundtable is produced in the studios of WIPB Channel 49 on the campus of Ball State University. The producer is John Rouse. Listener comments are welcome.
This is Geraldine Batt from the Department of Employment and Training Service reporting job openings for Muncie and the surrounding area. Apartment complex maintenance. This part-time job requires skills in painting, minor carpentry, electrical, and plumbing work. Must have own truck and tools. Will work 15 to 20 hours per week. Architectural designer drafter. An entry-level opening has been listed by a local employer for a person with a degree in architecture. Employer may accept 5 years experience in lieu of a degree. Licensed plumber.